Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at the Daily Bible. My name is Lou Gallo, and we're glad you're watching. Today's Bible reading is from 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 1 through 15. Give a listen.
I wish you would bear with me in a little foolishness. Do bear with me. For I feel a divine jealousy for you, since I betrothed you to one husband, to present you as a pure virgin to Christ. But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. For if someone comes and proclaims another Jesus than the one we proclaimed, or if you receive a different spirit from the one you received, or if you accept a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it readily enough. Indeed, I consider that I am not in the least inferior to these super apostles. Even if I am unskilled in speaking, I am not so in knowledge. Indeed, in every way we have made this plan to you in all things. Or did I commit a sin in humbling myself so that you might be exalted, because I preached God's gospel to you free of charge? I robbed other churches by accepting support from them in order to serve you. And when I was with you and was in need, I did not burden anyone, for the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied my need. So I refrained and will refrain from burdening you in any way. As the truth of Christ is in me, this boasting of mine will not be silenced in the regions of Achaia. And why? Because I do not love you? God knows I do. And what I am doing I will continue to do, in order to undermine the claim of those who would like to claim that in their boasted mission they work on the same terms as we do. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it is no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will correspond to their deeds.
So here we are, and we're talking about how do we view ourselves? How do we view those outside of us? How do we view other Christian ministers? How do we determine, how do we discern their message? We talked about that yesterday when I said you can either judge, outwardly, or you can become curious and ask questions. And that's as we look at things that are outside of us. But this passage here today, Paul kind of turns the camera around to selfie mode, and he directs the camera back at them. And he's saying, what about you? What about discerning what's going on in your life and in your heart? And he gives them something to consider. And in verse 3 of chapter 11, he says, but I'm afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. And so Paul is saying, look, there's forces out there, and you have to be alert to them. You have to be watchful to them. And so he's asking them to evaluate themselves. What are the things that you're drawn to? What are the things that get your attention, that draw you away from devotion to Christ? And that's why, even as we think about this series, as we think about doing the daily Bible and doing our QT, our quiet time, is that it's so that the Word of God can judge us. So the Word of God can evaluate us, and so that we don't get led astray like Eve did when she was deceived by the serpent. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, right? Because it takes a measure of humility to be able to look at yourself. And as I was considering this and as I was thinking about it, what about my own heart? What are the things that go on inside of me? What are the things that I desire? So if you think about the Corinthians, what was it about those false apostles? What was it about their presentation? What was it about their manner of speaking that it connected with the Corinthians? So there's a foothold there. There's a stronghold there, if you will. And so identifying that is very, very important. And so judging, from the external, judging because it's shiny and it glitters and it's catchy or it feeds our egos, those are all the wrong reasons to, listen or to take in. We have to be discerning so that we don't get deceived. And as I think about the title of this in English, the title is The Value of the Gospel. But I looked at it in Korean, and I really love the Korean version of this, where it just says simply, "Bokum gachi." Bokum gachi. Gospel value. And so the gospel is what we measure everything else by. Everything that we hear, everything that we see, we measure it by the value, by the message of the gospel. And the supremacy, the importance, the value of Christ and knowing Christ through the gospel. And so there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there that we have to be discerning of. And I just want to read to you out of 1 John chapter 2 and in verse 16. And so he says this in John, "For all that is in the world," so he's talking about the world, he's instructing these dear children, he has referred to them, these dear children, he's instructing them, "For all that is in the world." Now listen, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride in possessions is not from the Father, but is from the world. So we think about discerning, we need to discern through this lens. We have to look at our life and look at, what are the things that we desire? What are the things that we want? What are the things that we see that capture our affection and our attention? Paul is saying, don't judge based on what you see. Don't judge based on worldly standards, but judge on the value and the basis of the gospel. Bokum gachi. This is what I would say. Eve is an example to us. She saw, she took, she ate. And they connected with something in her heart. This is what I would ask. Evaluate your heart. What are the things that you desire? What are those things that you desire more than God? What are those things that you judge outwardly as being appealing to you, but then draw you away from God? And ask yourself that question. Does this draw me near to God? Does this pull me away from God? And that's our thought for today.